Welcome back, everyone, to another episode, another edition of the Nick Solomon Show, the Sports Chatter Podcast. And folks, I'm really excited to bring you another great episode here. But before I get into episode 5, if you hadn't had the opportunity to watch episode 4, click the link down below. It's one of my favorite episodes I've done so far. Every episode is really good, but episode 4 is a game changer at this point. But if you have already watched episode 4, we're going to dive right into episode 5 here. And the first thing I want to start off about is the game. The only game that really mattered this past weekend. The only game that matters for 364 days out of the year. Nothing else matters but the game. If you don't know what I'm talking about the college football game versus the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Michigan Wolverines. That game took place this past Saturday. And of course, Michigan prevailed. At the time, it was the number 3 team, the Michigan Wolverines, versus the number 2 teams, Ohio State Buckeye. It was played in Ann Arbor at the Big House. Michigan prevailed. Oh, yeah. 30-24 was the final score in that game. The series record is, as I get my handy-danny stats book out here, series record now stands at 60, 51, and 6 in favor of Michigan. The score was kind of close. And to be honest, there were many points throughout that game that I was up off the couch. I got that last drive by Ohio State. That had me worried. They started moving the ball down the field. That had me worried. They got into opponent's territory pretty early. That got me worried. There really didn't seem like a ton of pressure, consistent pressure throughout the game. That got me worried. In the end, though, Wolverines did what I kind of expected them to do, and that was win. I didn't think it was going to be a blowout like the last 2 years have been. I didn't think it would be. I didn't think they'd be able to run the ball as efficiently or have such big plays like they did the past 2 games. These are things I haven't really seen from Michigan this whole entire year. The dominant run game and the explosive plays. Now, they're a really good run team, but they're not the same run team as last year. Picking up that slack has been the passing game. A huge reason why Michigan Wolverines won that game is because we had J.J. McCarthy back there at quarterback. Oh, you could tell who was the upperclassman and who was in his first game of this rivalry, and that was Ohio State's quarterback, Kyle McCord. You could tell who was more poised in the pocket, who had more control of the offense. Now, Kyle McCord, it was 18 of 30, 271, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. By all means, for someone as a freshman playing in their first rivalry game of this magnitude, I'd say he played pretty well. The eye test, he played pretty good. The biggest killers are his 2 interceptions. To be honest, those 2 were huge interceptions. Sometimes throughout a game, you might throw in interceptions. Sometimes you can recover, depending on when throughout the time and place of the game that interception occurs. Yeah, these 2 interceptions were pretty bad. The first one came in the first half, and it was Ohio State was already backed up beyond the 10-yard line, and he throws an interception right to one of our Michigan's best corners, too, and that set up Michigan for a go-ahead touchdown. And that pretty much put Michigan up 7-3, and Michigan didn't look back after that point in the game. But that set Michigan up to score pretty easily. Second interception came on the very last play of the game, or the second to last play of the game. Last play of the game was a kneel down for Michigan, victory formation. But pretty much the last play of the game for the Ohio State offense. In between those 2 interceptions, he played pretty well as any freshman quarterback playing in this type of a game. He played pretty well. he had me worried. He had me worried and has me worried going in the future. But we're not here to talk about the future right now for this game. We're here to talk about this game, what occurred last Saturday in Ann Arbor, and that was that Michigan got their third straight win. That hasn't happened since the late 90s, from 96 to 90, or sorry, from 95 to 97. It's the last time they've won 3 straight versus Ohio State. JJ McCarthy, as I mentioned earlier, was the veteran presence. I mean, he was 16 of 20, which is highly efficient. 148, it's to be desired, and 1 touchdown. That 1 touchdown to Roman Wilson, that might have been the best throw I've seen from Michigan all year long. Now, he has made some outstanding throws. I am so glad that he decided to come back for one more year. Last year, he was such a dominant run-based team. He didn't have a lot of opportunity to showcase exactly what he can do. This year, you can tell he has had complete control of the offense, completely under control. Doesn't seem to really get nervous in the pocket. Later half of the year, he started to make some mistakes a little bit. He's gotten a little banged up, too, in this back half of the year. But you can tell he's the veteran presence on the field. He's the captain out there on that for the offense. And he looked in control. I mean, I never felt worried anytime he had to step out and throw. Anytime he did, he delivered. Looking at the stat comparison, both these teams kind of stacked up pretty evenly, across the board here. They're pretty well matched up in total yards. Ohio State had a lot more passing yards, but Michigan dominated running the ball again. Not as much as the last 2, but they still had 40, 50 something plus yards on Ohio State on the ground. There were some questionable calls, I will say. Some key plays on this game. There was the Roman Wilson touchdown that I mentioned earlier. When Roman Wilson caught the ball, which was on a dime between 2 defenders, but bear in mind now, if one of these 2 defenders had just turned their head to look at the quarterback or look at the ball, that would have been an easy interception. But both of them turned their head to focus in on the receiver, and JJ McCarthy just zip-lined that ball straight through both of these defenders into Roman Wilson's arms as he's going across the 3-yard line into the end zone. After Roman Wilson caught the ball, one of Ohio State's best cornerbacks, Denzel Burke, was swatting at the ball best he can. I mean, this is a bang-bang play. Of course, on the 3-yard line, so it's right at the end zone too. And it did look like he did hit the ball, and the ball did kind of bobble around, and there was a little bit of a fight as both him and Roman Wilson went into the end zone. And as they ended that play, Denzel Burke came up with the ball. It could have been classified as an interception because it was so quick that did Roman Wilson have possession of the ball as he broke the goal line, or is the ball coming loose? The ball was coming loose as he was crossing over. It doesn't have possession. And if Denzel Burke kind of came up with it after a little scrum at the end, that's classified as an interception. The call on the field was a touchdown. And I went berserk because it was such a great pass. Plus, he's in the end zone. This puts Michigan up ahead even more at that point in the game. But slowing it down, instant replay, it sure did look like he bobbled the ball as he was going into the end zone, and Denzel Burke came up with it. I to be honest, as that play went under review, as all scoring plays are, I was sweating bullets. I had thought that it was going to be overturned a touchdown and called an interception, and that could have turned the game. Michigan had a great drive driving down the field, but it was such a bang-bang play that the referees called it as it stands. touchdown on the field. Thank goodness. Do you know how many plays have went against Michigan in recent history? Not just this game, just many games overall. So maybe we were owed that one. Maybe we weren't. Maybe it was just such a hard play that they just go what was called on the field, which was a touchdown. You know, there are other key plays on that. Throughout the game. There was a 4th and 1 call on Michigan's plus side later in the game to sweep it off to Donovan Edwards. And it looked like a little of a crease if he could get around, but he stops. What does he do? Tosses the ball 20-plus yards to our tight end, Colston Loveland. No one else in sight. It was such a brilliant play. The only thing I would say to critique that play, Donovan Edwards, you have to lead him. You're a running back. You shouldn't be throwing the ball. I get it. It was a good ball that you threw 20-plus something yards. You got it to the receiver. If you just would have led him, it was a touchdown. The fact that he had to stop, catch the ball, he ended up getting chased down after 5 more yards. But that's because he had to slow down. But I don't want to knock the play too much. It was a brilliant play call, fantastically executed. And that was a gutsy play call, too, at that time and day. Tro Moore, tell you what, on his resume, 2-0 versus top 10 ranked teams. And versus Penn State, running the ball 32 straight times. When's the last time that's really happened in a collegiate game? In this game, calling play like that. He didn't really he made a lot of gutsy calls, I would say. But none of them you would ever scratch your head and just say, wow, this is going to come back and bite him if it doesn't go well. You know, Michigan was 3 for 12 on 3rd down. It's not good. They were 3 for 3 on 4th down. 3 for 3. And that'll check some boxes. There were some other key plays. This doesn't really go for Michigan, but Marvin Harrison Jr. got his numbers. 5 or 118 and a touchdown. Yeah, if it wasn't for such a quarterback-heavy draft, there's a good chance he'd go number 1. And that'd be in any draft, by the way. He's that good. I'll give some love. I'll give some roses to Marvin Harrison Jr. Dude's unbelievable. He looked so much like his dad. But, yeah, he scared me on the field. Absolutely. The only mistake Ohio State did was just not targeting him enough. That's on Ohio State for not doing that. Other key plays that I loved in the game, they brought in the backup running quarterback, Alex Orji, and he pretty much did exactly what he was called upon to do. Did a QB sneak, ran for about 12, 13 yards. Could have been more if he hadn't gotten tripped up a little bit at the line. But there was some brilliantly great play calling on the Michigan side that led to a lot of positive plays. But when it came down to, as I opened it up with, they tried to run out the clock, didn't quite get there. They kicked the field goal, and it made it 30-24. Ohio State has the ball, about a minute left to go in the game. Throwing from their own 25-yard line. And in 3 plays, they marched it down to about the 40-something, 50-something yard line. Yeah, I was sweating. About 30-something seconds left. I was sweating pretty hard. I was nervous. Oh, my goodness. All they needed was a touchdown. That's all they needed. And they were moving the ball pretty efficiently. And then we do a 4-man stunt. Defensive lineman switch off after the ball was hiked. Kyle McCord steps back to throw over the middle. He gets hit and pressured as he's throwing it, which does throw off the arm angle and the throw power. And he gets picked off by our safety, Rod Moore. And I screamed in enjoyment because that was the game. It was a really great game. It did live up to the hype. Everything you expect from a number 2, number 3 team. Both of them top 1 and 2 scoring defense. And I couldn't be happier that we ended up on the winning end of that. So with some injuries in that game, with an assistant coach acting as head coach, with your All-American guard going down in the second quarter to a gruesome lower leg injury, pulled together as a team and still came out with the victory. Very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. This is the year to do it. This is the year to do it. So once again, hats off to the Big Ten East champions, Michigan Wolverines. We'll get to this a little bit later in the show when we talk about our conference championship games that we have coming up this weekend. But good luck to them in that game versus Iowa. Okay, I want to move on to another subject here I haven't been able to touch yet while doing these podcasts, and that is hockey. Hockey isn't always a sport that's really talked about a lot nationally, unless there's some crazy story going on or the Stanley Cup finals are happening. A lot of time hockey isn't talked about. I'm not here for that. Hockey deserves its flowers. Hockey deserves its time in the sun. And another team that should be talked about right now going on are the Bruins. They're still on top of the Atlantic Division. Okay. So I want to examine real quick why the Bruins are on top of the Atlantic Division. When you have 3 of your top players gone, Patrice Bergeron, he retired. He was a captain. David Krejcik, he retired. And Taylor Hall was traded. That's over 2,500 points that's siphoned away from your team. Completely expected and known that this team would regress. And they were overanalyzed, apparently, because they have a 14-4-3 record. And they're 5th or 6th overall in NHL. When you lose 3 star players like that, yeah, you're expected to have a little bit of a downfall. That's not the case here. A lot of different players have stepped up. A lot of different players have come out and shown out. And that's with, by the way, on a 3-game losing streak that they are right now. So you can say that they're 4-1-3 just of last week or a week and a half ago. So hats off to the Bruins. Hopefully they can continue their amazing hot streak. Could come down to earth, though. It is still early in the season. Lots of hockey still left to be played. Okay, I want to wrap up by talking about the NCAA Conference Championship games that are upcoming this Saturday evening. And actually, a couple are going to be kicking off tomorrow night as well. I said this in episode 3. I really wish the 12-team playoff was this year, because it's come down to so many great teams, so many great leaders of these teams. And in the end, there's only going to be 4 teams that are going to get the final 4 spots for the college football playoff. So just to give you a little rundown of the Power 5 conference championship games going on right now, or going on this weekend. You have Oregon and Washington, Texas versus Oklahoma State, Georgia versus Alabama, Louisville versus Florida State University, and Michigan versus Iowa. The first one, Oregon versus Washington. I'm going to take Washington here. Washington has been outstanding all year long. They already have a victory versus Oregon early in the year. That's not to knock Oregon here. This is a top 10 matchup of both these Pac-12 teams. Both of them have been solid all year long. Again, Oregon's only loss is to Washington at Washington. Expect this game to have some fireworks. I would expect it to be somewhere around 40, 45 points, 40 to 45, something along those lines. You couldn't go wrong with the winner or the loser of this game. This is very much a pick'em game. Both these teams have shown up and shown out this whole entire year. Both these teams are deserving to possibly play on. But I'm going to go ahead and take the undefeated team, and that's Washington in this. Then you have Texas versus Oklahoma State. It's very simple. I think Texas has been riding pretty consistently this whole entire year. Compared to the other divisions on here, maybe have gotten a little bit overlooked. They do have the one loss on their record, and that's versus Oklahoma. But I don't see Oklahoma State being an issue for Texas. Oklahoma State is a versatile team. I believe they're 21 ranked team, and Texas is the 7th. So it's going to be a pretty good game. But I have Texas coming out on top. You have Georgia versus Alabama. Because why not? Because has there ever been, except maybe LSU versus Alabama, has there ever been, at least in recent history, any other two teams playing in the SEC championship game? No. I'm going to go with Georgia. Now, Georgia I haven't been impressed with Georgia all year long. They do have some really good SEC wins, like at Missouri, but at Tennessee. But I do see them beating Alabama because I haven't really been that impressed with Alabama either. I think they've been just skating by this whole year. Both of them are still good teams, but I'm going to have Georgia coming out on top. Then you have the ACC championship game with Louisville versus Florida State. Now, Florida State was able to get a huge win last week versus Florida with their backup quarterback. Louisville had a tough loss versus Kentucky last week. Yes, it was at Kentucky, but it was not expected for Louisville. I don't know what to expect in this game. Before last week, I had Louisville honestly winning this game because these two teams were determined to be there anyway. But Louisville losing last week and Florida State showing out, I think I'm going to roll Florida State. I'm not going to be surprised if Louisville wins, but I'm going to take Florida State. And that's sort of that underdog story because I don't think anybody had them as a top 3 team coming into this year. No, or top 4 team. No. Then we're going to go with our nightcap game, Michigan versus Iowa. This is an easy one. It's Michigan. No disrespect to Iowa. Iowa is 10-2, have one of the best defenses in the country as well, another top 10 defense for them. But we've heard this story before. This was the storyline in the 2021 Big Ten championship game. Iowa had the best turnover defense in the nation, best scoring defense in the nation. Michigan pretty much rolled them. Now, Iowa didn't have as good of a record in 2021, overall record, as they do now. But I think anybody would say, looking back at that 2021 Iowa team, and think that that defense is better than this one. Even though this defense is so formidable, their offense is pretty much pudding. I mean, once Michigan, I believe, is going to be ahead 14, let's just say up by 14 points, it's over for Iowa. And I think it's going to be over for Iowa. I don't think it's going to be quick work, but I do think Michigan is going to win comfortably. And that would be another perfect regular season for Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. So how I see the Final Four team shaking out. With the teams that I mentioned winning here, it's going to be Georgia in order too. Georgia number 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, and Florida State 4, which I believe is the current order right now. Maybe Washington and Florida State might be reversed, 4 and 3. You have Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Alabama on the outside looking in. For any of those 4 teams to try to get in, chaos needs to happen. If Alabama beats Georgia, I mean, that's good for my Michigan team because that's going to vault Michigan up to the number 1 spot. But that may create an avenue for Alabama to get in. What if Louisville beats Florida State? Florida State's going to be out. That could create an avenue for Ohio State, for Alabama, for Oregon, for Texas. If Oregon beats Washington, could that create space now for Oregon to get in? Do they deserve to get in? If Oregon beats Washington, you have Alabama beating Georgia, Louisville losing Florida State, or even Iowa, knock on wood, Iowa beating Michigan. Does Texas sneak in the back door and get this Final Four? So there's about 7 teams here that have a chance to maybe sneak in and get it. But a lot of chaos has to happen for Oregon, Texas, Ohio State, and Alabama to try to get in. Chaos has to happen. Luckily, none of these championship games can end in a tie. At least, I don't think they can. Let me know if they can or not. I'm not really sure on that. Well, guys, this is an exciting weekend coming up here. And I hope everyone had a good holiday last week. Little announcement here for this show. What I'm going to do for the rest of this season for the Nick Solomon Show, the Sports Chatter podcast, is probably do a few more episodes for the remaining of this year. And I might take a little hiatus, a little break. And then we're going to come back with some surprises. So we'll just leave that little Easter egg there. More details to come on that later, but I just want to go ahead and give that announcement as we are turning the clock to December. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care.